Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner or regular shirt to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
This is Phil Stevens, strength coach, Strength Guild, a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and
Hey, it's Dr. Mike T. Nelson, associate professor at the Carrick Institute, and actually I'm now teaching for their master's program in clinical neuroscience. That started on Monday, which is awesome. I created the Flex Diet cert, and still here in Minnesota.
Yeah, you always have to sort of add that, right, because it's a rarity.
It is, yeah, so I go back and look for posterity's sake. Like, oh yeah, he was home a lot.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. Record it for, for the future.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we have what may be a slightly briefer episode. My microphone is way on the fritz, and I am going to replace it. But I shouldn't even draw your attention to that. Now that's all you can hear, if that's what you can hear. Maybe it's just me. We got some news, and then after the break, we're going to talk about what's in your fridge. So you can take this as a spot check for yourself and think about what's in your fridge and why. Okay, so first, some news. These are not brand new, but I just stumbled across this again. So,
Strength and Muscle Sport News.
The new Dietary Guidelines for Americans are out. This is the 2020 through 2025 guidelines. And I just thought I would run down these things with you. I've always thought about these things sort of as the 10 Commandments of nutrition, right? Not to sound sacrilegious, but it's not the My Plate or the Food Guide. It's just sort of this joint publication from the USDA and HHS, and they're mandated to do it every 5 years. So the new ones build on the old ones, and I just thought I would run down what the feds, essentially in the U.S., think are the, in this case, sort of the 4 commandments of nutrition. Maybe this is sign of the times, right? 10 is too long. We need sound bites, so we reduce it to 4. Yep. So let me run down this quickly. It says, the foods and beverages that people consume have a profound impact on their health. I think we all know that. Increasingly robust evidence shows that a healthy dietary pattern, and that's going to come up repeatedly. This is a carryover from the last guidelines. Pattern is sort of the key. It says the core elements of a healthy dietary pattern are remarkably consistent across the lifespan and even different health outcomes, right? Whether you're worried about diabetes or cancer or whatever. Since the first edition was published in 1980, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans have provided science-based advice. And again, they're mandated through an act that says every 5 years the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health and Human Services must publish these guidelines for the general public. And you could get this if you were to just type in 2025 or 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. You can actually get this giant, like 30 meg PDF file. I'm just going to give you the executive summary here. One heading here says consistent and evolving. Although many recommendations have remained relatively constant over time, the dietary guidelines have evolved as new scientific knowledge has become available in 3 important ways. and here they are. First is recognition that diet-related chronic diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, and even some forms of cancer are very prevalent among Americans. That's not a surprise, I think. Today, more than half of adults have one or more diet-related chronic disease. More than half. Diet-related chronic disease. So that's the first concept here. The second is a focus on dietary patterns. As I mentioned, nutrients in foods are not consumed in isolation. And that's one of the things that I liked in the last dietary guidelines, right? Is that we're not talking about just a nutrient or even a whole food, which of course is a collection of nutrients, some good, some less good. But what's the pattern? And I think that's what's going to lead to our topic after the break about, what's in our fridge. Maybe you can sense a pattern with the way the three of us eat. Not that we're paragons of virtue, but, Phil's put on enormous amounts of weight in very short amounts of time. We've all gained and lost 10, 20 or more pounds of body fat, by manipulating these things. So I like to think we more or less know what we're doing here. Anyway, the third sort of focus here under this consistent and evolving is a focus on lifespan as an approach. So different stages of life. The patterns are actually pretty similar, but that's what we'll get to. The guidelines here, a healthy dietary pattern is not a rigid prescription, and they're really into customizing these days. And I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I mean, overall, I think it's good. People are going to have different allergies or intolerances or likes and dislikes. But if you give people too many options, they just don't listen, How many times have we all been told, just put me on a diet, But then that's Mike's diet or Phil's diet or Lonnie's diet, that we're prescribing, and it may or may not fit them. So I guess they're saying, listen, you got to learn the basic principles here to make it customizable. Now, so here's the meat and potatoes of it. There are 4 pillars, if you will, this time. 1, follow a healthy dietary pattern at every life stage. And we might tailor that to us to even include our athletic careers, right? Like career longevity is a big deal. We're all old enough to be feeling the scars and the arthritis and things like that. So they list the life stages as infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and then also pregnancy and lactation, and then finally older adulthood. And I won't bore you with that. They do say a lot of the basic principles are consistent, though. Number 2, customize. And this is what's standing out, at least to me, in the new 2025 guidelines here. It says, customize and enjoy nutrient-dense foods and beverage choices to reflect personal preferences, cultural traditions, and budget. Well, I'm glad they're at least saying that budget thing, because we have all run into that, right? I can't afford to eat healthy. And then you can counter with stuff like, dude, dry beans and rice are dirt cheap,
Yeah.
Oatmeal. You don't have to eat skinless, boneless chicken breasts all the time. Now, that can get pricey. I get it. But, even on the protein side, cans of tuna or cheap protein powders that might fit the bill. Number 3, focus on meeting food group needs with nutrient-dense foods and beverages and stay within calorie limits. And for our group, it might be like what Phil does is try to blast through calorie limits, right? Like how do you do the opposite in a sense to gain weight? Because I was talking to a former student just recently about this. She's working with a client who, he wants to gain a lot of muscle mass and lose fat at the same time. So, it's always that discussion. Like, how do you get in a calorie surplus and a calorie deficit at the same time? Like, that's what mesocycles do, periodic goals that change. That's why that happens. But here are the food group comments here this time. Core elements of a healthy dietary pattern based on food group. Vegetables of all type, specifically dark green, red and orange. And then they kind of have a separate category for beans, peas, and lentils, also just considered veg right now, and also starchy veg. So, you could go for starchy veg. It might have that extra bit of nutrient in it, like, yams, right, the traditional bodybuilder kind of food. Get a little bit of the orange in with your starchy Fruits, meaning whole fruit. Grains, half of which are whole grains, right, that have the bran. They're not just the stripped down endosperm starch kind of thing. Dairy, so fat-free or low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese. Obviously customized with lactose-free versions if you need it. Protein foods, and, you know, for all the talk about plant-based this and that, the dietary guidelines still say lean meats, poultry, eggs, and seafood. So good. You know, we're not going to just discard the idea that animal proteins are more complete. They're more anabolic, if you will. But it does say beans, peas, and lentils and nuts in this category too. And I think that's fine, right? Throw those on top. That's sort of your thing, Phil. Like, you know, eat what you need and then throw other stuff on top. And I'm telling you, nuts are a great way. Peanut butter shakes, handfuls of mixed nuts. That's a great way to throw healthy calories on top of everything, and maybe even enhance cognition and stuff like that. So, and then oils. I can't say I agree with this one. Oils, including vegetable oils. Well, that's where I'm raising an eyebrow, right? You know, Mike and I, we talked about that. Most vegetable oils are crap, frankly. The omega-6 inflammatory stuff, corn oil, safflower, soybean, cottonseed oil. But now, if you want to say olive oil, then I'm on board, right? But you can't just go to the grocery store and if something kind of generically says vegetable oil, man, run from that. And then they also mention seafood and nuts under oils as well. So you can see that some of these things, they don't fit neatly in a food group like protein or veg. Anyway, the last one here, number 4, limit foods and beverages high in added sugars, sat fat, and sodium, and limit alcoholic beverages. Now, the language sometimes changes, even though the guidelines don't. This is limit alcoholic beverages. In the past, you know, they've sort of been a little bit softer. Like, have your beverage, you know, 2 for guys, 1 for gals, and that's based on, like, alcohol dehydrogenase and stuff, body size, why men get a little bit more. But now they're saying just limit it because there's been some science trickle out in the last, I'd say, 2-3 years that I've been noticing it, that really no amount of alcohol is recommended necessarily, right? So just try to limit it, I guess. But again, it's like limiting sodium or saturated fat. It's like, all right, I'm not going to completely avoid that, or I'll be a twink my whole life. For added sugars, less than 10% of your calories. For saturated fat, less than 10% of your calories. For sodium, less than 2,300 milligrams per day. I can tell you that's going to be tough. Because it's going to...
Oh, isn't it? That seems low.
Yeah, it's low. Average Americans easily consuming double that. Yeah, and it's going to eliminate things like soup, which is where you might get your vegetables or, you know, have it at work. I mean, I guess you can get the lower sodium soups. And then it says alcohol, choose not to drink or limit your intake to 2 drinks a day for men and 1 for women. So, again, the actual numbers throughout what I've just been reading you here hasn't changed that much, but, you know, they just sneak in a few extra little tidbits, like choose not to drink if you can. I don't know if a lot of our listeners are going to do that, but... So, those are the guidelines. The executive summary. Again, this is an enormous document. If anybody wants to go check it out, just making you aware that you can go get this giant PDF. And maybe when we talk about what's in our respective refrigerators, you'll get some idea about how maybe we interpret this stuff. But you can see how they build on old ones. If anybody's familiar with dietary guidelines, they're just not letting go with a lot of stuff that I think a lot of lifters don't fret about, right? Like a lot of keto people, they're not going to fret much about saturated fat anymore. They're just not, especially when they don't have a lot of sugar and carbs in their diets, you know, or sodium. We've talked about that in the past. You know, if you are on a ketogenic diet, you're excreting sodium like crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you want to go on a real low sodium diet. Mike, does this all sound just the same to you, or any?
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds pretty similar, but like you said, with the alcohol, there's a few things that are a little bit different. And if you look at the updates kind of over time, there's no radical, complete shift in 5 years, but slow kind of hopefully steadier progress. I do agree with you about some of the oils. Based on the data I've seen, I don't really know how they can leave that in, but I'm sure a lot of people will cry that it's all just, special interest based and we shouldn't listen to it at all. But
Me too.
There's actually a lot of data that goes into this. It's not just special interest.
Yeah, no, but you're right, though. You know how they do that, the FDA or the USDA, when there's a big question, they kind of open things up to the public for comments.
Right.
And we've had guests on the show who actually talked about their experience doing that. So you'll get the sugar refiners people come out, or probably a lot of these, soy growers of America things, or Mike, you and I remember the high fructose corn syrup booths that were sponsoring a lot of conferences, trying to rebrand it as not bad, and
wasn't one of them it's just sugar or something like that?
Right. Yeah, I wanted to sneak up there with a big poster board and just tape up, "Yep, that bad." Because as if, right, the sucrose is fine or something. Phil, I don't even probably have to ask you, but a lot of this stuff I'm sure you follow, because you, being more off-grid in a sense, and like Gentleman's Farm and all that, you're just going to follow a lot of this stuff anyway.
Yeah, we do. Even the alcohol thing, we don't drink a ton. I could easily stick to 1 to 2 a day, and it ain't going to happen. It's more like 1 or 2 every few weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my wife was joking, and I agree with this. Instead of 2 a day, like my brother actually tended to do that, but he's hypertensive. I'm like, dude, don't do it, I look at it more like I'm going to save up that 1 or 2, and if I go out on Friday, I'm not going to count.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So, yep.
Yeah, I saw that in some people's HRV scores on January 1st. I would see normal, just completely tanked. So I emailed more than one client of, how many drinks did you have the night before?
Right. I remember you, when you guest lectured to some of my seniors like that, about that stuff. They're like, oh, because that's the kind of stuff with the HRV people are tracking. They just want to automatically assume it's their exertion and overtraining, and it's like so many things affect this.
Yeah, and it's a super easy way to exactly point that out, that your training, everything else affects it, but doing that's a stressor on your system, and that's not my judgment. I'm just saying that for your system, that was a pretty significant stressor, so do with it as you want from there.
Yeah, exactly. If you are on the edge of overtraining, maybe you don't want to touch the alcohol.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got 2 more quickly here. This next one, I'm curious about you guys, because I don't do any of this, and listeners are probably rolling their eyes, and the acute and prolonged effects of different durations of foam rolling on range of motion, muscle stiffness, and muscle strength. This is a Japanese paper, Nakamura and colleagues. Let's take a look here. Foam rolling has been used in sports settings to increase range of motion and decrease muscle stiffness without decreasing muscle strength or athletic performance. But they wanted to dig in more, right? It'll always say, however, there are gaps. So they assigned people randomly, 45 participants, to one of 3 groups. 30 seconds of rolling once, 30 seconds of rolling 3 times, or 30 seconds of rolling 10 times. Now that sounds excessive to me, but we've talked about that before. People go into the gym and they spend their first half an hour, rolling in this and that. But I'll skip to kind of the bottom here. It says there was no significant change in shear elastic modulus. Now, Mike, you're the engineer here. That's how much tension it takes to make something deform. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's a mechanical property looking at, are you changing the way a tissue would deform?
Okay.
Yeah.
So no changes in that, or muscle strength in all groups. The study suggested foam rolling for more than 90 seconds. So I guess it would be that second group, that 30 seconds for 3 little bouts, was effective in order to increase the range of motion immediately without changing muscle stiffness or muscle strength. And then they just point to some key points here. Dorsiflexion range of motion, so they're looking at the lower leg here. Dorsiflexion range of motion was increased after 90 seconds or 300 seconds, so that's the 10 bouts, of foam rolling intervention, but did not increase following 30 seconds. So just the quick 30. There was no significant change in elastic modulus after 30 second, 90 second, or 300. And lastly, the increase in range of motion after foam rolling could be contributed with the change in stretch tolerance. And that, when I saw that, I thought about what you had said once, Mike, about it. You're not actually changing the tissue acutely, of course. You're just sort of, I don't know, allowing your nervous system to say, okay, I'm going to allow this. Is that fair, or what do you think?
Yeah, like there's been, I think, 3 studies that have looked at this, like the old school sit down, do the hamstring stretch, we measure how far you can get to your toes. Then a group who repeats that, so they do it multiple times, and then they look and they go, ooh, look, you can stretch farther than what you did before, therefore static stretching is a good thing. But then when they looked at the mechanism of what's going on, you didn't really lengthen any of those tissues or change any input to the nervous system per se. But what you did is you told them, okay, go till you feel a stretch of a 9 out of 10 or whatever the study says. So you actually got worse at feeling sensation, right? So your tolerance for that 9 out of 10 actually got a little bit better, which enabled you to go a little bit farther than to still hit that 9 out of 10 target, which to me is kind of backwards. It's like I kind of want to know where all my limbs are in space, and I kind of want the best information. I don't know if I want to get better at a stretching tolerance to push harder into something with less feedback. That seems backwards to me. But,
numbing, almost, yeah.
Yeah. It's like I could give you an injection of Novocaine or something there, and you could probably stretch really far.
Yeah. Well, Phil, in group settings and all that kind of stuff, I mean, where is the status of foam rolling, and do you encourage it or whatever?
It was real bad there for a while. Like, everybody had a foam roller, and they were doing 30 minutes of it.
Yeah. I knew people were traveling on planes with their foam
roller. It was everywhere. And I see the fat has dropped down a bit. I mean, we have a few at the gym. People only, like, I'll get on one if I need to pop my back. I'll just roll my back up and pop my back up. I feel great. And that's, people will use them if something's hurting or something, a specific thing is bothering them. I don't have a lot of people that just have like a foam roller routine.
Okay. Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, foam rollers are neat and all, but I mean, if most of my people, if they have a real issue, they go see somebody. So we'll get some soft tissue work done, things like that.
You mean a real professional?
Yeah. I mean, foam rollers, they just haven't panned out like people hoped, I don't think. Yeah. Well, I mean, the foam roller industry loved it, but...
Well, this study says if you're going to do it yourself, 30 seconds won't cut it. Do 30 seconds 3 times, essentially. Otherwise, you might be wasting your time. That's kind of what I'm taking away from this.
90 seconds isn't much.
No, right, yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. And you know what I like about it, to be fair, I mean, not to be too salty, is it's proactive. It's proactive self-care. Just like nutrition would be or something else. It's an important addition just from a completely different domain. Mike, I know you do this. I had a nice phone call with Sean Casey recently. He's been on the show. He does some soft tissue stuff in addition to, the nutrition and the exercise stuff. It just creates that proactive mindset, I guess, if that's the right word. So.
Yeah, I like the mindset. I wrote an article 16 years ago that everybody hated about why you should stop foam rolling, and everybody lost their mind. And shout out to Smitty at Diesel Crew. He was the only guy who wanted to run the article. Everybody else said it was insane. But yeah, I love the idea. I think that it may be useful for some people. I don't really think it's worth a lot of the time. I think you can take your hand and your thumb and do some other stuff and just myofascial work on yourself and get a lot more specific with it and get a lot greater result from it than flopping around on a foam roller like a dead fish. But, I like the idea.
Yeah. Mike, it might have been Sagan said, skepticism doesn't sell, right? And so that's what you're running into. I want a t-shirt, right? Skepticism doesn't sell.
Yeah. At the time, I literally was going to file for a patent on a foam roller that had like these little spikes and bumpy things on it because everyone was all into trying to make it as painful as possible without any other rationale.
Nice.
And I did it in good conscience, and yeah, I probably should have done that.
Metal spikes with vinegar on them.
Yeah, because that's what you saw. Like, who could make the hardest, stiffest foam roller with the craziest thing on it to create the most pain? Like, that's what sold a bunch of items for quite a while.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. All right, I've got one more quickly before we go to break, and then we talk about what's in our fridge. Maybe people can look in their own fridge. This is protein as a topic, and protein's always an issue with lifters, of course, because we eat far more than most people, to the chagrin of some dietitians or health professionals, I suppose, although there's no good data to suggest that lots of protein is damaging to healthy people. But this is from the Institute of Food Technologists, How Protein Bolsters COVID-19 Recovery. So it's so pervasive here in the States. If you're in another country, you're like, oh, you poor Americans, you're just saturated with COVID. And yep. But so it says, though sometimes overlooked, nutrition plays a critical role in the treatment and recovery of COVID-19 patients. And they start off right off the bat here with a sidebar. It says, quote, in addition to anti-inflammatory and antiviral drugs, amino acids can play a role in mitigating the release of cytokines, thus decreasing overall mortality. So I have seen a couple of different papers. In fact, I have a little thing on the door of my fridge about my COVID supplements. And most of the stuff is things that are anti-inflammatory that I do anyway, just because I'm an inflamed old lifter. But anyway, it says, one complication of COVID-19 involves the so-called cytokine storm, a hyper-inflammatory response caused by the overrelease of cytokines. And of course, that can cause multi-organ failure and even death. And it says, in addition to anti-inflammatory and antiviral drugs, amino acids do play that role in mitigating the release of cytokines. And that's according to Ferrara in a brand new paper in 2020. Interestingly, the IFT suggests some individual aminos here. L-glutamine supplements, 10 grams 3 times per day. Let's see. People who did that, they found that they were hospitalized for fewer days and were less likely to require admission to the ICU, to intensive care. That's CENGIZ. Kengiz, et al. In 2020. It says glutamine may help preserve lung and intestinal function and significantly reduce the amount of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So that's interesting. I've long been interested. Glutamine is one of those things where if you're taking it to get buff, you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. But if you're doing it, if you're really overtrained and that kind of stuff, it might be one of those arguably conditionally essential amino acids that your body can make, but not fast enough if you're under a huge amount of stress, kind of thing. The data goes back and forth on that. But the other, it says arginine and glycine may reduce the number of certain inflammatory agents in the alveoli, so right down there in the sacs of your lungs, thus limiting damage to the lungs. And that's Ferrara et al. 2020. And then maybe simplest of all, complete proteins, like those found in animal products, may also exert an anti-inflammatory effect. And that's Fernandez and Quintela in 2020. So it's based on new findings. It's not just the stuff that we've known, but it sort of does reinforce. But the idea of amino acids or proteins as being anti-inflammatories, it's just pretty cool. It says, to this end, the European Society of Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism, or ESPEN, recommends immediate initiation of oral nutrition supplements that provide 400 calories and 30 grams of protein per day. Now, that's per day. And I mean, for us, that would be per meal, I think. And then it says, in addition to modulating the immune response, protein is required to prevent the loss of muscle function and the catabolic response to COVID-19. One metabolic derangement associated with severe COVID-19 is impaired muscle metabolism, increased muscle and protein breakdown, decreased muscle protein synthesis, and increase in acute phase proteins, according to Stachkowska Stakowska in 2020. Espin recommends 1.3 grams of protein per kg for critically ill patients. And if that doesn't sound like a lot to you, because a lot of lifters are doing more like 1.6 or 2.0 or more grams per kg, when you're not hungry, it's hard to push food on people. But I thought that was interesting stuff. So this, one of the things that we already do, I guess, is what I'm suggesting, could put us in a protected mode.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Eat the meat.
Yeah, eat your meat. How can you have your pudding if you don't eat your meat? So, all right, that's going to be it from the news. When we come back, we're going to ask each other some questions about what's in your fridge and why.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, look at me. Come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now!
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. For this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go. Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
And we're back. All right, everybody, this might be a slightly shorter episode because of some technical issues we're struggling with here, but we're going to get you something good. This week, what's in your fridge? So I want you to take the opportunity, if you're listening to this, to take a look in your fridge and think about why those things are in there. And that's what I want to ask these guys about some of this. Now, I should probably add the caveat. I don't necessarily mean your long-term freezer, because I think we all probably have a separate, freezer for the half a cow kind of thing and all that kind of stuff. But the stuff that's at the front of your fridge, of course, matters because that's going to alter your behaviors, right? It's the kind of stuff you can reach in and just grab. So let's talk about that, Phil. Just out of memory, I guess I'm asking you, but what's in your fridge snapshot right now?
Milk. We get raw milk from a local dairy.
Okay, raw.
So we've got some of that. That's today. We get that every Saturday. I'm just thinking shelf to shelf. There's some orange juice up there. Next to that would be a bunch of eggs. So probably 4 or 5 cartons of whole eggs and then some of those egg whites. Drop down. kind of leftovers on whatever the heck that shelf is, the second shelf. So
mystery meat.
Yeah, and then below that would be starting to get into vegetables. There's a tray with like meat, cheese, butter, blah blah blah. You know, there might be some cold cuts or whatever in there. Turkey, butter, cheese. A drawer of peppers, probably if I had to guess, green peppers, some red peppers, lettuce, stuff like that. Perishable kind of fresh items. There's another drawer that's usually full of apples and lemons, maybe a grapefruit, and that's about it. And then the freezer part of the fridge, which has meat, but mainly meat and bags of like peas and stuff. Condiments on the doors. I don't know.
Right? Yeah, as we all. Yeah. According to the new guidelines, it looks like you're following a lot of this stuff with the pattern, but you're not really too concerned about the saturated fat, right? You got egg yolks and cheese and butter. Why are you not concerned about sat fat?
I mean, in my mind, it's one of the healthier ones I can choose over like your, vegetable oils and things like that. So we do. Like I didn't even mention that. There's probably a jar of rendered beef tallow or pork lard in there as well. And we use that to line our cast iron pans and things like that, or cook with. So, yeah, and I mean, the overwhelming evidence to me does not show that it's that bad of a choice, and it's a lot better choice than a lot of things. So, and it's delicious. So.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're layering it on. Like you're layering it on. There's a lot of high quality proteins, yes, but vegetables and things like that, non-processed foods. Whereas I think a lot of times people automatically assume that a high fat diet, just like a high protein diet, means a Big Mac diet, And again, we're back to the patterns thing, and that's why I like the patterns thing, right? Because as part of a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables and lean meats and stuff like that. Is it having the same effect? That's very debatable. What about the raw milk? Is that just a convenience? Is it flavor, or is there something about raw milk?
It just tastes really good.
Okay.
It's really good.
Fair.
So I can't go back to regular milk after trying this. So, yeah, that's my main thing with it. It's just really good.
Yeah,
so.
It's the whole milk, so higher fat content.
Yep, it's all just whole milk. Yep.
Yeah.
So, you can see the big layer of cream sitting on top of you. You don't shake it up.
Ooh, so good.
Yeah, it's really.
It does sound good, actually.
Yeah,
Now, I guess one risk would be with unpasteurized milk. Of course, you got to get it fresh, right? So you're getting it fresh.
Yep, we have to go out to the farm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We drive out there and pick it up.
Right on. Don't want to get listeria or something. All right, Mike. What about you? I always look to you for such variety when it comes to lifting type stuff. Let's see if your fridge reflects this.
Yeah. So right now, just kind of in random order, we've got some leftover steak we made the other night. So we pre-cook a whole bunch of it, so we would just have to heat it up and makes it easy. We've got a little bit of venison left over we made the other night. We got that from a friend, some venison steaks, and they're actually quite good. They were quite tasty. We have in the protein department some chicken we put in a glass pan that's marinating, so we'll throw that on the grill today. All we did is just squeezed a bunch of lemons, 2 limes, sea salt, pepper, and garlic press. Just kind of mix that all together, leave it sit in your fridge overnight, covered on the bottom shelf. So we'll throw that on the grill today. I have some veggie shakes that I made up. So these were carrots, spinach, lemons, limes, and wild frozen blueberries. So just threw a bunch of those in a blender, kind of blended them up. Another trick on that, we just have them in the glass jars. And if you fill them like 3/4 of the way full, if you're in a big hurry, you can just throw a couple scoops of protein powder in there, and you got all your micronutrition and some protein. And if you need a lower calorie snack, if you're running around, have some liquid fish oil in the door. Of course, we have some dark beer, which is a coffee stout right now.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really good. It's
Nice.
from a local brewery in Duluth, actually. Bunch of eggs, butter, Parmesan cheese, one other random cheese that I'm not sure what kind it is. Some veggies down below, as we mentioned, spinach, carrots, lemons, limes. We have some potatoes. So this week, instead of rice, I've been doing more potatoes. So take a bunch of potatoes. We scrub the outside. I like putting sea salt on the outside, and then just throw them in the oven. So we'll bake like 7 of them at once. My parents got them from a farmer up from where they're at for, I don't know what they got, like 100 pounds of potatoes for like $30 or something. It was pretty cheap.
Just cheap, yeah.
So we got a bunch of those, and just they're already been cooked, so they're in the fridge. And I found that if you throw them in a pan or something like that with some sort of meat, we had that last night, it doesn't take very long, and they taste really good. So you get kind of maybe a little bit more of a different type of starch, right? They used to do that with white rice, right? So if you had white rice and you would cook it and reheat it and cook it and reheat it, you change the starch, the fiber content, so more resistant starch.
Mm-hmm.
It's also just easier. I've got some Greek yogurt, and I've ate all of them, but I've got one little packet of the Oikos, the 000 yogurt, which normally I eat when I travel, but we've been buying them lately. It's 15 grams, and it's really not many calories to it. So if you're looking for a high calorie snack that's already pre-done, those are pretty good. What else we got here? Yeah, I think that's about it. I got some cookies in there, of course, which are tasty. Chocolate chip, very good. That's about it, really, other than some random condiments. My wife uses some condiments. I don't really use many. I use like some coconut aminos, sea salt, basic stuff, butter. But she uses a few more of the condiments. And what else? That's about it. There's a bunch of random stuff in the back. I'm not sure. Not sure what it is.
So I'm trying to listen to this almost like a typical day's strategy. You know, like what patterns am I looking at there? Like Phil, you're doing a lot of the stuff unprocessed, a variety of foods. You're hearing fruits and vegetables kinds of things. I'm not surprised at the wild blueberry, like the local thing, 'cause upper Midwest, that's just delicious thing that's on hand, you know, and so different from regular blueberries, in my opinion. But I know that's just
really
one
small.
ingredient.
Like these actually we got surprisingly enough at Costco, and they weren't that much more expensive, but they're really tiny. But I find just putting them in shakes or like you did, Lonnie, put them in your oatmeal. They're really tasty. I quite like them.
Yeah, to me they're sweeter and different from regular blueberries.
Yeah, and as weird as it sounds, they look even more blue.
Yeah. Now you're obviously just like Phil's not shying away from the fat. It sounds like you're purposely using sodium to marinate things and stuff like that. So you're probably not too worried about the sodium stuff.
No, I actually do better when I've added more salt to things. So lately we've been using Redmond sea salt, and then I bought some pink Himalayan sea salt, but I wanted it in a different size. So I bought the little bit bigger, kind of crystallized version, and I took our super old coffee grinder, and where you just have the button that you press to get to whatever style of coffee beans you want. So I took the crystalled sea salt, stuck it in there, and then kind of ground it up a little bit till I got the right consistency. Mm-hmm. So I was using that more for steaks and potatoes, and that worked pretty good. I tried putting it in a plastic bag and took a hammer and was trying to crush it on the floor till the plastic bag blew up and made a mess.
Right, yep.
So
I've been there.
Coffee grinder, that works a little better. Yeah, and like Phil, if we have leftover bacon, we have some bacon in there too. We use the bacon grease for the cast iron pan, and then we've got primarily coconut oil if we're doing cooking. Yeah. I don't cook with a lot of butter because I'm just kind of lazy, and if I don't watch it, it'll scorch.
Right,
I'll put butter on afterwards.
Yeah.
But coconut oil, lard, bacon, all what's left over from that works pretty good.
Yeah. You know what I'm not hearing from you guys is a ton of just what I might think an average American fridge. Large amount. I got a 2 liter of Coke in there and loaf of white bread and stuff like that. Similar to you guys, I've got some leftover ham still from the holidays. It's still good. Bacon. I got a carafe of cold brew coffee in there, just for variety. Some smoked salmon. I like to eat smoked salmon on bagels and Triscuits and stuff like that. It's funny, over the years I used to put it on there like at first almost like a condiment, because some people are like, I don't know if I can do the fish it's smoked, but it seems raw, and it's like now I'm putting more salmon than cracker. It's like eat sort of that's Phil's thing, like the carbs are the vehicle, to get it into your mouth. Lunch meat, I get nitrite-free lunch meat, so with work starting up on Monday again, I can just take big things of lunch meat. I have light string cheese, just I think from a calorie perspective almost, like during the day. Like I'm not trying to eat more calories right now, but light string cheese is a great way to get high-quality casein in you, in an enjoyable way. I'll usually eat that with like some baby carrots, or just raw mushrooms that I dip in hummus or something like that.
Portable too for a protein.
Yeah, no doubt, right? Portable. I got some leftover Brussels sprouts in the fridge, some fresh salsa, not the regular salsa, but the fresh salsa that's not so cooked and salted and all that kind of stuff. I love that stuff. Good for the old prostate and the old man. Some light English muffins, and I've got some flatbread pizza crusts. And again, yes, that's sort of refined carb in a way. It's sort of cracked whole grain stuff, so maybe it's not refined, but again, the vehicle, right? What are we going to put on there? All olives and artichoke hearts and sun-dried tomatoes and chunks of chicken and, so again, some thought there. I've got a thing of bone broth. That's my poor man's joint remedy, So I take my fish oils and some of my other stuff in the morning, curcumin and stuff, or some vitamin C, stuff in the morning, and I actually just fill a couple of Dixie cups, and I just swish it down. I take it with the bone broth just to get a little bit of, collagen in there, I suppose. In the cabinet, I've got coconut oil, coconut fat, if you will. I'm not shying away from that. In fact, we were just talking about COVID stuff. There's actually some of our recent, last year, let's say, episodes about coconut and MCT actually being in trials for treating COVID-19. Interesting. I mean, I don't think I would do that by itself, but supportive kind of thing. So, that's kind of the rundown. And, this is just a snapshot. It's not like this is going to be the same thing a month from now. There's going to be some consistencies here for all of us, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Another tip we went to recently, too, I don't know if I told this, is frozen green beans. Again, this time of year, they're from Costco because there's a much farmer's market stuff going on. And I'm surprised that they're quite tasty, and you can buy like a huge bag, and you just boil water, throw them in a pan, and they're done in a couple minutes. Because we used to buy more of the fresh version stuff, even off-season, and it just wouldn't keep that long. And sometimes I'm like, man, I want to eat green beans for like every single meal for 4 days in a row. So now you just have them in the freezer, and they only take a few minutes to cook, too, so that works out quite well.
That's a good tip, because canned green beans that most people consume, the gray, salt. Ugh.
So bad.
So bad. Yeah. It's proof that if you overprocess anything, you're effing it up.
Yeah.
Gross. And I think, honestly, that's why so many people they don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, because they're like, that means I have to eat my canned green beans. No.
Yeah.
There are a million vegetables out there.
Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. Well, we said it would be a shorter episode today, everybody. And again, got to get this mic replaced. But unusually, I actually have a tidbit, a sneak peek about some of the news next time. If you're interested, next week we're going to talk about some recent data on problems with being a vegetarian. So if you're a vegetarian, you can disagree. If you're, a carnivore, you can cheer it on. There's some stuff about Britain's got some new restrictive food laws. So we are just talking about salt taxes and stuff like that. And I don't know, are you stepping on people's freedoms, or, I mean, is it my God-given right to kill myself if I want? Kind of thing. And then a potential COVID risk for lifters. This is something that surprised me. And I don't mean exposing yourself in the gym, but it's something dietary that you might want to avoid. I don't like avoid strategies, but this is something that you might want to avoid. So a couple of tidbits coming next week. So having said that, I guess we'll see you at that time.
See you.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.